What is it that firm owners look for in terms of the insights and knowledge from new graduates? It's not actually business.
Hey Growth Tech, welcome back. I am your host, Tyler Sumula, and we are diving into the top 10 challenges that I hear from firm owners most often. By the way, if you enjoy this podcast, please just take a moment to subscribe and leave a review so that other architects can find us too. So today I've invited my friend Beth Lundell Garver to chat about the gap between education and practice of architecture. She shares how higher ed is changing and what you as a firm leader can do to improve business education for yourself and for your employees. And before we jump in, a huge thanks to our friends at the American Institute of Steel Construction for sponsoring Season 4 of the Growth Tech podcast. Here is a fun fact for you. Did you know all domestically produced steel beams and columns are 100% recyclable and contain, on average, 92% recycled content? You can learn more about sustainable steel at aisc.org/sustainable. That is aisc.org/sustainable. Check it out, and let's go ahead and jump in. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited to have this conversation because you're not going to be surprised to learn that it comes up in almost every conversation that I have with an architect. And I was just telling you about it. Somewhere along the way, there's a statement that's made when we're talking about the challenges that they're having in their business. And it's always framed with something like, well, we didn't learn about business in school. So, I'm having XYZ problems. And I'm wondering what your initial reaction to that is.
Well, there's many different directions. I think one is, we didn't learn about it in school. And that's true for the most part. Let's just say we really learned it in school. Let's say we covered it. We hold just a business practice semester. What would happen when we graduate and then go out and work? How many firm owners would be like, oh, you spent a whole semester studying business practices. We want you to reevaluate our entire firm org and look at our utilization rates and our multiplier, our MU factor, and where are the pitfalls? That's sort of what is it that firm owners look for in terms of the insights and knowledge from new graduates? It's not actually business. And so would you remember that whole semester, or let's just say a whole year of business operations? Would you remember it by the time that your firm is actually inviting you to the table to weigh in? So that's like one little piece.
Yeah. I like you challenging my utopian desire to just have a full year of business education for architects in architecture school. But that's a great point. I mean, how much of what you learned in school do you remember right afterwards? But also, it's kind of like the business school graduate in a sense, right? Like they have the same thing. It's not not often do they graduate and go run a business immediately. Like they graduate and go into a business and still learn how to run a business, even though they were just at school for it. So yeah, that's a really good point. It's one of the reasons I was so excited to bring you on because, like I said, this does come up in, it's probably at least 80 to 90% of conversations that I'm having with firm owners, at least that statement, right? Like the idea, the concept that they didn't learn what they needed to learn in school. And, we were talking before about how we've been conversing, at least over LinkedIn, for the last few years.
Yeah.
We've been aware of each other. But I really appreciate what you are doing at Boston Architectural College. I wish that all deans thought the same way that you did. But we have Beth Lundell Garver here. She is the Dean of Practice at Boston Architectural College. But please give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself and what you do there.
Yeah. I lead a pretty radical aspect of the degree programs at the Boston Architectural College, where our students are engaged in design education through courses. And then also there is a requirement for all of our architecture and interior architecture students, which is the majority of our students. We've got about 900 students currently, and 800 of them are in this group where, in addition to their courses, we ask them to go out into the world and find jobs, find communities, find places to apply what they're learning in the classroom so that they can work out the kinks and bring the questions back to their instructors, and their instructors can say, oh, have you thought about it this way? And then they can bring that back to their job, and their job can provide feedback. So we actually believe in what we call concurrent learning. And that means, hold on to your horses here, but going to school and working at the same time. And working is a loosely used. Many students come in already with a great deal of experience. But working could be volunteering on a community project, or we have a really wonderful community-based design center where we are serving clients on real projects. So sort of working, meaning out in the world, not getting course credit, but getting practice credit toward our degree. And at least three milestones within the degree program, our students meet with practitioner faculty to review portfolio evidence of what they've been doing out in the world in practice. And they have a conversation about what they're learning, and they actually have to kind of track what they're learning into competencies, which do not look too different from those in AXP, although we are broader. We have a whole entrepreneurship section where students can track very business-oriented skills that they're learning and see themselves grow from awareness to integrating the work that they're doing outside the classroom, and then leading it through advanced skill levels. So our students have to graduate with a certain number of hours and a certain level of skill, and we measure that quantitatively in skills that they're learning out in the real world and in jobs. And I'm dean of that. So
did you develop that too, or are you
No.
institute it? Okay.
Really interesting story. At least I think it's interesting. The Boston Architectural College has evolved over 130 plus years. We were founded in 1889 as a club that was a partnership with what were called poor draftsmen, or people who were working in firms and could not afford to go on the L'École des Beaux-Arts tour of Europe to get the prim and proper training. And so our educators in the Boston area collaborated with draftsmen working in firms in the Boston area to create a club where those draftsmen at that time could get an education and learn how to watercolor and more about the kind of fine arts. So this tie between work and practice and education has really been with us since our founding. And in the 70s, we were accredited, or we were seeking accreditation, actually not as a college or a university. In the 70s, we were a center, a nonprofit center. And we wanted a certificate program to be equivalent to a bachelor's of architecture. And so we asked the National Association of Architectural Accreditation Board to come, NAB, to come. And the feedback from them was, we love what you're doing. You're asking people to work, and you're not measuring or tracking that in any way. And so we need you, in order to be fully accredited, we need you to develop a process of evaluating the learning that's happening in work. And so after that NAB visit, the Boston Architectural Center at that time decided to dedicate a department to practice. They hired a head of practice whose name is Don Brown. He's amazing. He's still with us. He sort of started this whole thing. And actually, the BAC developed a tracking hours system and tracking hours aligned with competencies, which then NCARB borrowed for their IDP and AXP system that came after. So
I feel like borrowed is a kind word for
well, it's different. I mean, they're different. We're not not a regulator. We're an educator. So it had to be different. But the idea of tracking your hours and putting hours towards certain competencies. We had to do that because that's how we ended up justifying that there was real learning happening outside in offices, and we were measuring it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's developed its way, and ultimately now has this. This actually, that's what I love to hear. I love to hear how the curriculum was developed as a way to meet the needs of like getting the accreditation that you need, but like actually meeting that accreditation and does actually help the students, in the long run, where you end up developing a system that's kind of proving what you're going out into the workforce and learning is actually applicable to also what you're developing in your career as well. So that's awesome.
We feel
Win-win.
like it's the point, right? It's a win-win. Like you're interested in architecture and design. You're here, and let's just go ahead and see how it is. How's it going out there in offices? So we have your question about business and business education for me is honestly just early exposure into a firm and what does a firm look like and what does the day-to-day look like. And it's maybe not, so business operations, how much of our time is drafting? How much of our time is in meetings? What real type of communication do we need? What are fees? What are fixed fees? What are variable fees? How do we justify fees? So like going out and just stepping into an architecture office, I'll admit I had an extraordinary education I'm quite proud of, but I did not step foot into a firm until my fourth year in my Bachelor's of Architecture degree program. And that was in my professional practice class. And then I was like, whoa.
Yeah, very different than what I was expecting. I had after my first semester of architecture school, I got an internship, and I ended up going and working there for almost a year. And I had the same thing where I had stepped away. I mean, I was very early in my architecture education, but I stepped away and gone and worked somewhere for a pretty long time. And I'd kind of come back and been like, whoa. I feel like my most important class is apparently like construction documentation, because that is a lot of what I was doing in that process. But like to have those, I would almost consider them to be like correction points along your education, right? Where my dream is never to like bring all of the practicality of real life into school. Like I don't think that would be very beneficial. Like that wouldn't be super helpful. But it's nice to have those correction points so you can adjust your own expectations and your own learning along the way. Because if you don't have that, then it's you're either discovering it late or it's something that happens after you graduate and then you have a real shock to your system. So I love the idea of kind of integrating practice with education a little bit more intentionally, I guess a lot more intentionally.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to why. So, I mean, obviously, what you're doing at BAC, what's happening at BAC, I mean, this is unique, at least to my knowledge,
yes,
right? There's not very many firms or very many schools that are doing something to this magnitude, at least. I didn't realize, by the way, there's 800 or 900 students. That's quite the scale to be happening at. Why do you think this is such a persistent issue in architecture education and in the industry in general?
Higher education, it has, I think, an interesting identity crisis. And I live it, and I think that we are all living it a bit in this moment in time, at least in the United States. And there is this chasm between people and I think people working and very close to academia who are really passionate about long-standing self-actualization and sort of knowledge absorption, production, creation, dissemination that higher education is known for. I mean, I think that, all of the innovations that we've realized over the past, certainly many, many decades, have had some very, very strong connection to higher education and to research. And that is real and that is felt, but it is, and Michael Crow, who is president of Arizona State University, says this all the time. It's what he calls the invisible hand, and, higher education working to support industry to some extent invisibly. There's the other view that college and university is about getting a job, and it's about preparing people to then go out into the workforce, and that is its primary goal. And this decision, this choice, this binary is very, very real. I was in a room with 80 deans last year at the ACSA Administrators Conference in Denver. Really great conference. The one's coming up. It's coming up next week. And this very question was posed. And, the majority of the room leaned heavily towards higher education is about these long-standing values of finding yourself, thinking critically, knowing how to go out and understand research and histories and heritages, think how to think and to think critically. I mean, we're talking like 90% of the room. And I voted for the career readiness side. Very unpopular. I think, honestly, it was me and NCARB. The NCARB was there.
Just Beth and NCARB over there. Oh no. Okay.
But I think the binary to me is a sad binary, because I gave the room my most passionate plea, but I don't think they have to be mutually exclusive. I really think we can have both. We try to do that at the BAC, not just as you said, not by saying, okay, school, we're going to crush everybody's dreams, bring all the realities into school and just do it. You're here now. But there's this idea of lifelong learning that also can happen in a firm, that, you can grow and develop. And this is why I brought up what I did at the beginning, which is knowing that as dean of practice, I see firm leaders as much as partners and learning partners as I see instructors of courses, because whether you're in a more traditional school where you graduate and then go work, the firm leader is also a teacher and a mentor and an advocate and a supervisor, and has to give feedback and help people continually improve. And to some extent, maybe we also could say project, just even management. So principles of business, but also principles of what does it mean to be a manager? That is not addressed in school, but we do get into it at the BAC, because our students have managers and they have to have supervisor evaluations in order to get their practice credit, and which means they have to get feedback and speak to it, and faculty are reading it. So I'm going to stop, because I've just kind of said a lot, and I don't know if I even addressed your question.
No, I think you did, because I mean, it's you answered my question. I'm just bummed out that was the outcome from the example that you gave. I'm bummed out, but also not surprised at the same time, because I agree. Like, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And I can also, but I understand, I think, the other side of it, what the schools are trying to, let's say, protect in a sense, right? Are those things, because they are, I think, extremely important to education. But it's interesting for me to hear. It's interesting for me to hear you say that, and that's what the response was, because a challenge that comes up so often with my conversations with firm owners is the fact that they are overthinking and underacting, right? So they think about something so much, and they've theorized about it for a week, a year, years, right? A decade, right? That they've been thinking about something and they've never actually taken action on it, right? And so I can't help but think that obviously that's reflective of our education. Like, we've all done this. We've all had to think so deeply about something, right? And our actions in it, usually in education, is still theoretical in a sense, right? Like
Yes.
nothing is totally real to that extent. And so it definitely bleeds. Like it bleeds into it bleeds into the practice, right? It bleeds into the practice of architecture. And so there's gotta be a middle ground somewhere, you'd
So
hope.
some light.
Yeah.
I think that architecture schools have done a really remarkable job since I'd say well 20 25 30 years in community-based design centers are really serving communities that are in any way connected to them. And those are community-based design centers that are growing out of architecture and design schools. They do, as far as the acting goes, they have people who are they have been told have a problem and are asking for help in solving it, and community-based design centers are doing that. And NCARB has reflected their appreciation of having kind of a special work setting where you can report your internship and AXP hours in that area. I think that is fantastic, and that is more the norm now in architecture schools than not. I'd say most architecture schools have some sort of community-based design center that's doing real work for real clients. And some of them are actually doing really well in terms of their business operations and structure, which is inspiring to me. I run one, and our business model still needs to needs more money, but it's a tough thing to do, since we're not in a position to, at least at the BAC, be our clients just don't have money to pay us. So, but that makes the work even more impactful. The second is the design build. So a design build pedagogy has also, over the past 3 decades, really proliferated. And that is another, actually go do the thing and get your hands dirty. And I am a child of the Rural Studio and Samuel Mockbee and the design program out of Auburn. I taught under Samuel Mockbee in 2000, or I studied under Samuel Mockbee in 2000. So that is another mindset of think about it, but then you got to go try it out. You got to go, test and fail and test again and get another detail and source different materials. And so that's really good. And I bring this up because I think that architecture school is doing more than just thinking and designing theoretical projects. They are.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, Auburn is a great example of that. That's what I mean. I appreciate Yale for doing that too, right? They have that in their master's program. I think Tulane or something.
Yes, they have a
similar.
Fantastic community-based center. Yeah. It's a small center. Absolutely.
In Michigan, where I did my undergrad, I mean, at least like
DCDC.
From a robotics standpoint, I mean, holy smokes, there's so many opportunities to build. So, yeah. All right, Growth Techs, check this out. In Boulder and Atlanta, old buildings came down, but their steel beams did not go to waste. They went straight into new projects, and that is the power of U.S.-made structural steel. So here is how it works. Instead of relying on virgin iron and blast furnaces, we actually use modern technology to melt recycled scrap in electric arc furnaces, and that produces 6 million tons of the most sustainable steel in the world every single year. And the carbon footprint keeps shrinking. It's already down 12% in the last 3 years, and as our power grid moves towards renewables, it'll keep falling. Steel is strong, it lasts for decades, and it can be reused over and over without losing quality. It is a natural fit for adaptive reuse and for sustainable design. And if you want to put it to work, then download the free sustainability toolkit from our sponsor at aisc.org/buildgreen. That is aisc.org/buildgreen. One word there at the end. Go and check it out, and we'll get back to the show. So yeah, I think you definitely get exposure, and you have those opportunities, right? And at a minimum, wood shop, right? I mean, it's great to just have access to these tools and things to be able to build. So it's great that we have these reference points, right, of different programs that have worked out really well. And funny enough, I've heard so many amazing things from people that have done, the Rural Studio at Auburn. I feel like every time I speak to someone that's gone there, they have nothing but amazing things to say about it and how it's impacted their career. And by the way, everyone that I know that's had that experience is doing great things, in the industry. And so I don't think that's a coincidence, right? There's obviously something to the fact that you're combining and doing more, I guess, of what the BAC is doing, right? That you're integrating practice, you're building, you're using your hands, you're learning, you're not just drawing about it along the way.
And what's interesting, I mean, thinking about it now, when I was involved in, which was a while ago, but raising the money, students, needed to go out for grants and find money to support or reach out to manufacturers and see if they would donate windows or donate lumber. It wasn't just handed to you and saying, okay, we're going to do this. Week 1, week 2, this is an assignment. I think that it invites you in. Design build and community-based work invites you into the real messy, unpredictable, impacted by the weather, impacted by the economy, realities of business that a syllabus with only theoretical design problems might not introduce. So there are so many aspects of learning business, and there's management, there's finance, there's understanding, where you're going to be making revenue. So that is part of those pedagogies, those teaching methods, inviting people into the messiness of the real process, and also just kind of like, it's not glamorous. It's not going to be on the cover of a magazine, but every project has this, and this is how work gets done.
I think, what's great about that, it's a perfect transition into what I'm hoping to talk about next, because you're basically saying, like, they need exposure. Like, we need exposure to these things to learn. And so, as you know, the vast majority of my audience they're firm owners, they're firm leaders, typically, in this space. And so I'd love to understand, like, how should they address the lack of business education that they had, but also to the point that you just made, which I think is really important. How do they expose and train the young architects that they have coming to work for them now that probably didn't go to BAC or might not have gone to a school like BAC and do not have that education, and so they don't repeat the same mistakes and the same kind of experience that they just had, where they find themselves running a business without really having any idea how to do so?
Yeah. One thing would be that there's the perpetual pointing fingers between architecture school and firm owners and firms and architecture school. We are where we are. People know what they know. Firm owners are right in that I heartily believe that currently, when I mentioned this, currently there's 3 credits in most architecture schools, of which, if we're going to talk numbers, graduate programs, and this is NAB accredited, but graduate programs have 90 to 120 credits, and 3 out of that would be professional practice, which is where the business, the real focused business operations conversations happen. And then for undergraduate programs, bachelor's of architecture programs, they have 150 credits. So 3 credits out of 150 credits are professional practice and business operations. So firms are not wrong. They're right. And that is work to be done. Advice for firm owners, talking to firm owners. So yes, architecture schools need to do more. But at the same time, architecture schools to some extent are constrained, or let's just say they're very mindful of accreditation requirements. And now and if this has come up, I don't know for you and your podcast too much, but the competency framework that the National Council of Architecture Registration Boards has, which is identifying 16 core competencies that NCARB has surveyed firm owners and practitioners that they believe to be necessary to be minimally qualified as an architect. 1 out of 16 of those competencies is, I think, it's the very last one on the list, and it is foundational business practices.
Okay. I mean, 1 out of 16 is a little bit better than 3 out of 90. So we're getting slightly better, but yeah.
You're right. You're
Yeah,
right. You're getting slightly better. Is there in that it says foundational business practices?
Yeah.
I think that what would be wonderful is if emerging and younger recent graduates or had a chance to be in the room where, and this doesn't, I don't know how often this happens. I guess it happens probably more likely in smaller firms than larger, but to be in the room to hear about, what is the utilization rate? Like, how much do you expect me as a worker to be drafting versus, going on site and meeting with a client or being in meetings, understanding how firms see them in their business model. And that's kind of scary. So I think that, like, if we're really gonna do more to have our younger firm players involved in business and contributing that way, it comes with vulnerability, because they're not just going to, at whatever point the firm is like, okay, please now share your business knowledge and acumen with us. Those conversations don't happen with young, like, recent graduates. I don't even know if they happen really at the project manager level beyond the project finances and project model. But firm operations and firm business model conversations, you just don't get access to those conversations until you've been someplace for quite a while. So I think it's scary. You might not want people to see inside what your thought process is, but I've always, and this is part of what we do at the BAC. Of course, we're not competitors and we're not sharing what students are sharing with us, but we learn about what students are experiencing in firms. We see students tell us that they're focusing and doing business operations. And we're seeing more students get business operation experience from everywhere other than architecture firms.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny you say that because, and I'm so glad that you brought this up. We're talking about transparency and how your business operates. So, I worked in large and small firms before I ultimately stepped away from architecture, and I went and worked at an architecture software startup, right? And that was the first time I had ever worked at a company that, on a monthly basis, we talked about how the business was doing. The entire company, no matter, the whole company gets to see how the business is performing and how we're doing relative to our goals. And it was such a mind-blowing experience to me. And it does, I think, the opposite of what architects are afraid it's going to do, right? I don't sit there and I'm like, wow, there's so much money flowing through the business, I want more of it. That's not what I think. I look at it and think, wow, we need to generate this much more revenue to hit our business, to hit our goals as a business. How can I contribute to that, to make my value more clear to said business? And so, it's so important. There's kind of two challenges, at least that I've seen with firms with this. One is that they actually don't have good transparency themselves. Literally, the firm owners, don't have good vision into how their business is performing. So that's problem one. But problem two is that they have it and they don't want to share it, right? And so I very often see firms where the project managers don't even have transparency into the project budget, and it's I don't even How is a project manager supposed to manage people's time, energy, your firm's resources if they don't actually even have anything to measure against?
Yeah.
So you're right. Yeah, you're spot on. It's we need that. The trend. It's not a one-sided argument. It's not only education needs to do better. It's also on the other side. As firm owners and as firm leaders, we need to make it easier to expose young architects to this.
Yes.
1000%.
We find often try to be a little bit of a trailblazer, try to teach students about practice, not only so that they can go and engage in practice and get a job and a career, but so that they can transform practice. There's plenty of work to be done there. So try to do that. Part of what can be challenging is when we are teaching students about the future that we want to realize, and they just don't really see it in yet being getting traction in real examples of firms. Just label is a helpful thing to point to with transparency. So the more of these conversations that can be had, where even if you're doing a firm visit, and usually in firm visits, and this is another, honestly, both of us, academia and practice together, need to really wrangle with this. There's this sense that if you're a designer, then you're doing the design drawings and the design work, and somebody else who is not a talented designer is going to, or however it works out, is going to be running the pro forma and doing the budgets and tracking money and thinking about the innovations that the business can realize to be able to bring in more revenue or do, new streams of market access and research. And man, capital D design, design is extraordinary as a skill to be applied to the way that we think about the business models and new markets that we can reach into and research that we can develop and how we can grow our firm in this area. That really is design work. And while you may not be doing it in Revit, while there may not be plans and sections and elevations to attach to that, those fields, again, if we separate ourselves, we look at McKinsey Consulting, global, company design, or global business analyst, they have an entire branch dedicated to researching and tracking how design is improving business outcomes and bottom lines. And that's not because design as architects, that's because they recognize design, capital D design, is making businesses more profitable. And yet in our own firms, there's this dynamic of, a certain person does that work, and it's not really design thinking, or it's not. So then if you are an emerging architect or designer, you're somebody who's thinking about where it is that you want to go, you may not dream of being the person who's coming up with innovative business models and new pro formas and fee structures, because that's not what's celebrated. That's not what's seen as being I might be a really talented designer, but I could really do some very innovative, creative thinking about our business model. But but maybe that's not as successful. That's a ho-hum thing. So I want to be, a principal and lead these really large design projects. And we have a lack of innovation in the business model design space, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is the better you are, what you had me think, the better you are at designing, the more you're, funny enough, going to work your way out of designing. Because what happens is architecture is this funny industry where you actually end up getting promoted into doing something not based on your ability to do that thing, but based on your ability to do the thing that came before it, which is almost always design, right? So you're really good at design, you become a project manager. You're trying not to be good at managing projects, now you're going to manage an entire studio. You're a studio manager, now you're going to become a principal. Now, nowhere along the way, do you actually learn the thing to become the next thing, usually, in most firms, so it's a problem. But I so agree with this idea that with actually the value, let's take most architecture education right now at face value. I actually think it's an incredible degree to get. And most people might be surprised to hear me say that, because I do admittedly I don't always talk positively about architecture education, so I understand that. But I think it's an incredible degree. The problem is, I actually don't think it's an incredible degree for architecture. I think it's an incredible degree just for life. It should be called design thinking instead of architecture, because exactly what you're talking about, your ability to think, I think, outside of the box after an architecture degree is so much beyond so many other majors and educations that other people go through, and you don't really realize that until you until you jump outside of architecture. That's when you have the realization. You're like, whoa, this is super powerful. I didn't realize that I had all of these skills that are apparently super valuable to other industries and used in different ways inside of architecture. So like I fully agree. It's an incredible degree, even at face value where it is now. And I hope that more people will use that design thinking that we're getting now to change the problems that we have in the industry. I mean, that's like we need new practice models, to be fair. Like if we're going to continue to kind of adopt and merge. So yeah, I fully agree. Beth, thank you so much. Where can people go to learn more about you, to follow along?
Oh my goodness. Well, a friend of mine who is a vice president of business development for a really successful construction company and also a BAC alum has pushed me to be active on LinkedIn. So, Tyler, you've seen me on LinkedIn, and I am more than pleased. I am a real person there, and I try to connect and talk to a bunch of people. So please follow me on LinkedIn. And then the bac.edu it's the-bac.edu. Check us out. We are always looking to partner with firm leaders, and that maybe is just the best place to start. Is if your firm leader, really look at who your the schools are in your area, the architecture schools or even high schools, and reach out and see how you can get involved. I would certainly hope every architecture school has a way to link you in to studio reviews and feedback. And if you're not finding success in your area, reach out to me. We have online programs. Our students are all over the world. We have learning partners and firm leaders at over 500 architecture firms. And so we have a whole list of things that you can do to get involved with us and our students tomorrow. And we'd love to continue to collaborate. So thank you.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool to hear. Yeah, so please, go check out BAC, get involved at a minimum if you don't have a school locally that you can get involved with. And if anything, I mean, if I'm listening to this as a firm owner, I'm going to be looking for BAC students to hire because
hey,
I think they're going to be a bit more prepared than some of the others. So, do that too. But Beth, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Tyler, for having me.
All right, Growth Detect, that is a wrap on this episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy the podcast, then please take 30 seconds to share a review and tell me your favorite part so that I can keep making it better for you. And hey, if you want to work with me directly to increase your fees and start winning the biggest projects of your career, then send me an email at hello@growthdetect.com with the word grow. That is it. Just email me the word grow at hello@growthdetect.com and I will get you sorted out. All right, I'll see you next time, friends.